Okay, hello. What is the crack? You are very welcome to another episode of the From the Depths podcast. As always, my name is Emmett. And yeah, you're very welcome to another week and another episode of the show. So, I'm not too sure what I'm going to do with this. You're probably thinking to yourself, what are you on about, Emmett? Today, as I record this, it's Monday the 15th of February. So, by right, this episode should be dropping next Monday. I just put out this week's episode, and after doing no episode really last week, until there was a delay around the start of February. Last week's episode, the episode about separating the art from the artist, I released that the Monday after it was initially due out. So there was a week where there wasn't an episode of the show as I was feeling a little bit under the weather, and I gave myself a bit of a break. So I don't know. Do I put this out midweek as like a surprise episode to be sound, or what do I do? Because I did kind of dig myself into a hole. I said on the end of the last episode that I was going to have a panel episode for next week, which I will, but I just got a sudden urge to sit down and record this episode of the podcast, man. For those of you who don't know, I'm a student and I'm on placement through college at the moment. I came home from placement last week. I decided to invest in some storage units for my CDs. For years I've just been keeping them on a shelf over my bed. And I thought, you know something, there's CDs overlapping CDs and stuff like that now, and try and tidy it up a small bit. And it just got me thinking when they arrived and I got it all together and stuff like that. I was kind of thinking to myself, you know something, when I was a teenager and I was getting into all this crack, no one really told me about that. No one really told me about when you're collecting records and stuff like that, and you're collecting CDs and tapes and everything like that. If you collect any form of physical media at all, your collection is only worth really as much as your storage space. And what I mean by that is, you could have a first pressing of the Soundhouse tapes by Maiden. Very, very elusive record to find. It's very, very expensive. You see on Discogs, if you find that in Discogs, there's like loads of warnings about like authentic versions and stuff like that. And like, you could have one of those, you could have it absolutely in mint condition, it could be worth 15 grand. But if you have it in poor storage space, then the record its sleeve, it's going to crease. You might end up warping the record, God forbid. There's so many risks and stuff associated with record collecting in relation to poor storage that nobody tells you about. And that got me thinking about that. Like I said, I ordered 2 storage units today. They arrived, and I was just looking up on the shelf, and I just thought, you know something now, I'd love, if there was anything I could have, any heads up I could have given to 16-year-old me, it would have been that when you start collecting records and CDs and stuff, before you start putting away money on some kind of big records specifically that you're looking for, go and invest in some storage space. And I can't recommend that enough. Most of you listening will probably be smarter than I am and would have probably already done that. But I just thought I'd talk a little bit about record collecting, record shopping, record storage and stuff like that. This is a very, very unorganised episode of the podcast. I literally just got the idea to do it 5 minutes ago, and I thought, you know something, I would sit down and fucking press record and we'll see what happens. So this will either be a surprise episode of the podcast, or it's going to be the next episode as it should drop. Depends on whether or not that panel episode gets recorded this week. Hopefully it does. We've 7 days from today to get it done. So if it's done, this will be a surprise episode, or maybe it'll be a spare episode. Let's see how unorganised it will be over the next few weeks. So before we get into all that lovely, lovely crack, as we always do on the show, and as I always should have to do, I have to plug and promote some things. First of all, if you're new to the show, you're very welcome. Thanks for checking out the podcast. If you've been listening since we started, thank you for sticking along. If you've been listening for the last episode or two, thanks as well. Thanks very much for checking out the podcast. I do this for fun, I do this for the crack, and I very much enjoy putting them together. If you want to support us in any way, you can do so by following us on Instagram. That is at From the Depths Metal. You can follow us on Facebook as well, at From the Depths Metal Radio. Pretty much anything to do with the podcast, anything to do with my record collection too, and anything to do with the radio show that I host for Wired 99.9 FM, it'll all be shared on those outlets. And speaking of which, like I said, I host a weekly metal radio show for Limerick radio station Wired 99.9 FM, Limerick's only fully licensed student radio station, and it is simply titled From the Depths. It's the namesake of the podcast, and what I do on that is I sit down for an hour every week and I basically just play tracks that I've been listening to throughout the week. It could be classics, it could be new stuff, it could be stuff that, Jesus, it might even be released yet, but someone sent it to me and I have a hold of it. It's really a melting pot of different genres and stuff like that, and I have great crack putting those episodes together for Wired FM, and I've been doing it for over a year now, and I still enjoy doing it, and I'll hopefully be doing it for many more months and stuff like that to come. In the same vein as this podcast, I hope to be doing this for a good while too. So that is all that plugging and stuff out of the way. So what are we talking about? We're talking about record collecting, we're talking about storage, we're talking about anything to do with physical media and heavy metal music. That's a very, very simple way to put this week's topic. It's going to be a rambly ranty one, the same as last week's one, but sure, look, we'll have a bit of crack. And do you know something? An important point to make that I didn't make on last week's podcast, and I should probably start saying these anymore at the start of like the ranty style podcasts, or the rambly style podcasts I should say. If there's anything I say at any point throughout the episodes in which you don't agree with, or even if you take offence to it, I'm not saying anything here to be controversial. I'm not saying anything to get notoriety through controversy or anything like that. This is simply just kind of thought pieces. That's all it is. If you don't agree with it, you're an adult. Build a bridge. We can get over it. Don't go sending me ranty messages. I've already received since last week. It's currently 25 to 8 on Monday. I just put out the separating the art from the artist episode late last night. So it's been out in the public domain for less than 24 hours, and I've already received about 2 ranty messages from people about it, and I'm not even going to respond to that. If you listen to the podcast, it's very, very self-explanatory what my views and opinions and that are. It's very much a case-by-case basis, and no two cases are alike. And I do recommend you check out that episode of the podcast. I'm not 100% happy with it because it's such a sensitive issue, and I don't really think in hindsight that sitting alone and talking about that would do the topic justice, and I don't think I got all of my points across as well as I would have liked to. I think I acknowledged that as well towards the end of the episode, because I did make a point that I will be revisiting that topic on a panel episode of the podcast in the future. Whether that's going to be in a few weeks' time, a few months' time, I don't know. I don't really map these out all that much into the future. The only thing I really map out with regards to the podcast is interviews. I do know of at least 7 interviews that are going to be going ahead over the next few weeks. Some of which are going to surprise a lot of you, some of which even surprised me now when I got confirmation on them. I sent particular emails just on a whim, and I actually got responses from people, and I was amazed by that. And I'm very much looking forward for you to hear a few of those guests. There's some that a lot of you won't even know of, but they do some absolutely fantastic and superb things, and I'm very, very excited to be able to give them a platform to spread their word and all that kind of crack with regards to what they do. So yeah, we'll get to those things as we come to it. I'm already after going on a little bit of a tangent there. Let's get on to the topic we're talking about this week. We're talking about record collecting, we're talking about storage, we're talking about basically anything to do with collecting anything in relation to physical media as it pertains to heavy metal music. So let's start at the start, right? When do most people start collecting music? Well, most people start collecting do they start collecting music anymore? That's a podcast in itself. I know, like most people, me and my friends, we all would have started collecting music, but whether it was CDs or vinyls, at around like early teens, maybe early teens, between the ages of like 12, 14. That was when most of us started. I actually remember the first CD I ever had bought for me was the Gorillaz Demon Days. Not very metal, but I remember seeing this is how long ago it was. There was a time where there was actual advertisements on the telly, like regular advertisements advertising new CDs and releases and stuff like that. You see it the odd time with like Bruce Springsteen or Dua Lipa, but like back then it was pretty common to see it. And I remember being about 4 or 5 years of age and thinking that it was like a movie or a cartoon, given that the characters were animated in it. And I asked for that off my outlet, and he went down to Dave Woodford in the record rack, God rest him, and he got me a copy of that. But the first time I remember actually buying a CD of my own accord was 2008. I remember going up to Dublin with our school. I was in the Ennis Boys National, with a few of you that are listening probably went there too, and we went on a trip up to Dublin to watch a friendly between Ireland and Poland in the football. Any of you that know me, I'm not a sports head at all, but I was only going up for the crack. It was brilliant crack. We got to go up to one of the shopping centres up in Dublin. I don't know which one exactly it was now, to be honest with you. I was so young at the time. We went into Golden Disc, so myself and 2 or 3 of my mates, and every single one of us picked up AC/DC's Black Ice, which was new at the time. It was a new release, and every single one of us, and I'm sick now that more bands don't really do this. Some bands do it with vinyl, and it's an issue I'm going to get to in a minute. But every single one of us that bought a copy of Black Ice by AC/DC, every single one of them had a different colour album cover. Like the album cover itself is mainly black and it has the AC/DC logo in the middle. My one was red. One of my friends was had the yellow AC/DC font. Another had purple. Another had blue. And they cost next to nothing. I think I remember so vividly it being about €12 because I kept the sticker on that for years. I don't actually have it anymore, unfortunately, but I know the lads. I'm still friends with the lads that I bought that album with years ago. That was 2008, so over 12 years ago. Jesus, 13 years ago this year. Fucking hell, getting old. Yeah, that was the first time I remember consciously buying a CD and stuff like that. And I didn't for years after that buy CDs. I didn't really get into music properly until I was about 14 years of age. I got into music unintentionally. Most people get into music when they're kids and stuff like that. I got into music at around 14, being on a plane on the way back from Portugal and from a holiday with my family. And I don't know if it's been so long since I've been on a plane now, but years ago when you'd be on a plane, this is before smartphones were really like a wide thing that everyone had. You were able to buy headphones on the plane and could listen to like specific radio stations and things that were exclusive on the plane, or you could watch telly or whatever. And I remember like asking my mum if I could get a pair of the headphones. Cost like €2 or €3, really really shit headphones, like the ones you get for €1 inside in the €2 shop. And I remember sitting down and I trying to get a few channels working and they weren't working. And then I landed on this Beatles channel and I was like, you know something, I'll give this a go, and if it doesn't work, fuck it, I'm not going to even bother trying another channel. And I left it for 5 minutes in absolute silence, and as I'm looking out the window, looking out over the clouds, what starts playing but Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I shit you not, you couldn't have written a more perfect moment. And that was when I started listening to Beatles, and that was when I really got into music. For a year after that, do you know when you go into Tesco and there's like the corner where they have the CDs, where they have a few CDs left, and there might be 1 or 2 new releases, but there's loads of compilations. Like you'll always see that Thin Lizzy Waiting for an Alibi compilation, or Queen's Greatest Hits and stuff like that. And that's exactly what I did over that year. When I was about 15, I started buying those compilations. I bought like Thin Lizzy. I didn't buy the Thin Lizzy Greatest Hits. My dad had that 2-disc version with the silver Thin Lizzy logo on the front. That was my introduction to Thin Lizzy. I remember torrenting. Jesus, I remember torrenting the Beatles 1 compilation as well. And just that was what I did for a year. And a few years later then was when I got into metal and stuff like that, when I was about 16, 17 years of age. But up until then, buying physical media for me wasn't really a thing. Like, I bought Black Ice, like I said, in 2008 when I was about 12. But really, I didn't start collecting music at all until I was about 16. I'd nearly argue 17 years of age. When you get into metal and stuff like that, I know loads of us that listen to metal obviously love vinyl and stuff like that, but the thoughts of collecting vinyl and stuff is very much romanticised, particularly by older people. And when you're a kid, especially when you're a teenager and you're looking up to all these people who are playing in bands and actively like making a local scene happen, and you see them sharing vinyl, or if you're at something like the Siege and you're 16 and you see all these older lads hanging out around like an Invictus stall and they're all just skimming through records and they're talking with these big bulks of plastic in your hands, you can't help but look and kind of it's going to sound very weird to say aloud, but you're kind of, when you're a young teenager watching that, you're kind of aspiring to be that as you get older. You're like, fuck, I can't wait until like I'm doing that, until I'm buying records and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And now there's a few of you that are probably listening going like, well, I was buying records at 16. What 16-year-olds have money? Come on, be honest with yourselves now. I know when I was 16 I was buying fags and cans. The whole thing of buying physical albums and stuff like that wasn't really a thing yet, because I didn't really have disposable income. You'd be saving pocket money for you get for lunch during the week, if you even got it, and you'd be putting that towards your bush drinking session with the boys on the Saturday inside one of the local estates, and the music you'd be playing off of Spotify or YouTube, as are the ways when you're a teen. But when I got my first job, which would have been around, I was 17 or 18 years of age, I started working full time in a theatre in Ennis. I was working as a stagehand. That was when I really started buying vinyls. I was gifted my first vinyl on my 18th. My missus bought me she brought me 3 represses of she brought me 3 Misfits represses, Walk Among Us, Evil Live and Static Edge. She brought me the 3 of those, and I still have them, and they were just absolutely like brand new and everything. They sound perfect. But yeah, that was the first time I was given vinyl. Now I might have bought vinyl at like a record fair before, but I don't remember it, or I might have been given vinyl. But I remember that being the first time being handed a vinyl and consciously being, okay, this is mine. Do you know what I mean? My dad had collected vinyl for years. He stopped collecting vinyl just before my sister was born, and not because of the fact that my sister was born. It was because vinyl was outdated at that stage. This is 92, 93 I'm talking about here. And yeah, my dad has a huge vinyl collection in the house, and for years, since I finally got a record player when I was 18. I did, like, I was buying records like mad when I turned 18, but I was listening to a lot of his now. I remember when he used to work nights, when I would have been around 4 or 5, and he would go off to work around 5 in the evening. And I remember there's a cubby hole up in my sister's room that used to be my room, and he used to keep all his records inside there. And I didn't even know what these things were, but you look at, like, I don't know the name of the album offhand now because my mind's just pulling a blank. But you know that Van Halen album where it's like the little baby angel smoking fags, and Heaven and Hell with the three angels smoking fags. That's not going to be a running theme in this, I swear. But like the likes of Wheels of Steel. I remember years and years before ever getting into metal, I remember the images of these album covers being in my mind, and not until years later, when I was in my mid to late teens getting into metal, seeing these album covers and knowing what they were, and then in my mind just being like, fuck, that was the thing that was in my dad's press and everything like that, you know what I mean? And he has loads of classics, like, he would have bought like Black Sabbath's self-titled when it came out, same with Paranoid, loads of first press and pre stuff and everything like that. And it was really handy because, like, when I was a teenager getting into metal, and more so when I got, like I mentioned, my first job, working as a stagehand, and I had money to buy records, I would end up taking chances on more records because I wasn't immediately buying up like classics by bands, because a lot of them are here in the house, a lot of them are here like in my dad's collection, so I didn't need to go and buy those straight away. So instead what I ended up doing was taking a chance on a lot more records, and everyone has stories like this. The really popular story like this is obviously when Maiden's self-titled came out in 1980, and loads of people who would go on to form famous metal bands saw that cover with Eddie for the first time, didn't even know what the record was going to be, and they were like, I had to buy it. I've taken loads of chances on records like that now because of the fact that my dad had so many classics here in the house, and it was really, really handy because at that age, being around 18 and stuff like that, going to record fairs, I wasn't being robbed by lads running stalls paying like 40 quid for a version of Rainbow Rising. Do you know what I mean? I mean that happens too. That's an issue in itself. Like, people are overpricing records and stuff, and people being stupid enough to pay those prices for records too. But yeah, like I said, my dad having so many of those classics there, it saved me having to buy those as a teen, which was really, really handy in hindsight. But yeah, that was a thing. Buying records and buying music consciously for me would have started properly at 17, 18 years of age. And once I got that first job and stuff like that, and there was, I don't know the name of your man who runs this off the top of my head now, but there was pre-pandemic anyway, a very regular record fair that would run here in Ennis in the Temple Gate every maybe 4 to 5 months. Now, I haven't gotten to go to it, and this is before the pandemic now. I hadn't the chance to go to that fair for 2 years because my schedule is just up the fucking walls. Like, if I'm not in college, I'm working, and vice versa. I haven't, unless I have time booked off for a gig, I do not have time to go to record fairs anymore, and it's a shame. I really, really miss being able to go to record fairs and stuff like that. But yeah, when I got into collecting records and stuff, that was really my only immediate means of buying records outside of buying albums and stuff online, which I never really liked doing anyway. I've actually only gotten into buying records online since the pandemic started, and in fact I've actually stopped buying vinyl altogether since the pandemic started. I bought a few vinyl throughout last year, but I stopped buying vinyl for the most part this year due to storage issues. That's one I really, really want to touch on really quickly, and it's one that I wish, if I could go back and talk to that 17, 18-year-old me that's starting to buy records and stuff, I wish I could have said this to him. If you happen to be listening to this and you happen to not be a vinyl collector or a CD collector, and you're looking to get into collecting physical media, the most important thing anyone can tell you, which they don't tell you, and I don't know why no one tells people this, invest in storage space before you start buying records. And I don't mean go buy a lot somewhere. I mean buy proper storage cases. Oh, sorry, touched the mic. Don't buy proper storage cases for your vinyls. If you're going buying one of those compact players that has like a cassette thing with it as well, you know, those kind of wooden frame type of things, that works as its own unit, buy a little shelving unit for that for 50 quid on IKEA or something. There's loads of them. There's loads of brilliant ones on Amazon. I made the mistake of not doing that when I got into records, and it wasn't through pure ignorance. It just wasn't told, you know, and it's something that I don't have any cousins now or younger siblings that are getting into metal or anything like that, but I do have a younger sister who's big into music, and I'd only imagine now over the next year or two she's going to start probably collecting physical forms of media, because she's getting to that age that I was when I started doing it too. And it will be if I see her with a record in the house, I'm going to be like, right, stop this now, we need to go and get some storage space. It's so important, and I really mean that. And it's not, I'm not saying, oh, because you need to use the most of the space that you have in your house or anything like that. It's nothing like that at all. The reason I'm saying it's so important to invest in proper storage space is because you don't want your records being damaged. And I don't mean something catastrophic happening, someone falling on the records, which I've nearly done several times. I mean, you don't want the storage space itself to cause damage to the records, and it can easily happen. For years, I've been storing my vinyls, for better or for worse, in storage crates. Little storage crates that my dad got from work, and they're sturdy and they're straight, and they did the job, I thought, for the longest time. And I recently noticed I haven't been playing my vinyls as much during the pandemic, really because I haven't been at home as much, weirdly enough. I know everyone's locked in their house and everything like that. I've been working throughout this, so I'm more often out of the house to work than I'm actually in the house. I'm really only in the house to sleep anymore, or for college lectures or something like that. And since I started placement, forget about it. Like, I'm only at home maybe just the 7 hours to sleep, and that's it. But I haven't really gotten a chance to play many of my vinyls. And what I noticed is I was just looking at, I play the odd one once every few weeks, but that's about it. I picked up one of my records there just a week or two ago, and it was a record that I bought brand new, shrink wrapped and everything like that, and I might have only played it once or twice. And when I noticed from being inside in that storage crate that it started to cause damage to the corners of the record. Now, I don't mean it was splitting or anything like that, it wasn't, thank God, but it was creasing. And you may be thinking to yourself, that's a small thing, as long as it doesn't affect the record itself or the majority of the artwork, it's fine. But it's not really, because when you think about it, there's such a thing now amongst music collectors about getting specific pressings and all that kind of crack, which I will get into in a minute. But if you ever, like, a lot of people consciously, I joke about record collectors because they're very often like Del Boy out of Only Fools and Horses. You know what I mean? They could have a pressing of it from a specific country, and it mightn't be worth that much, but they will spin it and make it out that it is the rarest thing in the world. I like this myself. I know a lot of people aren't a particular fan of it. I love seeing Japanese pressings of albums or anything from an Asian market, whether that be China or anything, with the strip down the side where it's in like Mandarin or Japanese or whatever the specific language is of the region. You get that with albums that are actually from India too, and it's really, really cool. But there's a thing where people think those records are worth way more, are on par with first pressings. They're not. They're really, really not. They're not worth that much. They look great and they're cool to have and they're a fun novelty, but they're not worth that much. So please, if you're listening and you see someone trying to sell you like a Venom Asian press, they're not worth 500 quid. You can get them you can easily find them at a second-hand mart for a good 20-30 euro. So if you're listening, don't get fooled by that. But yeah, it's what was this? I'm after going on a rant or on a tangent about that. Let's actually talk a little bit about that, about first presses and stuff like that. But yeah, it's really important, like, when it comes to first pressings and stuff like that. It's such a thing. I remember this when I got into collecting records too, and I see people a little bit younger than me doing it all the time, and it's always just like, just got the first pressing of this, just got the first pressing of that. I'm going to be totally honest with you, right? Buying the first pressing of something really does not matter, and I'll tell you why it doesn't matter. Unless you have the intention of reselling that record down the line, it's not worth it. Buying a first pressing of a record is an investment. You're not buying a first pressing for the sake of owning a first pressing. The only people in my mind who have bought first pressing, like, there are people who like really like a specific band and want the first pressing because they might collect pressings of every album. But like, I know there's people I know that collect like every different version of every different Battery album. I'm guilty of that too. I own about 4 copies of the self-titled by Battery because I want the perfect mix, the original mix. I have 2 copies of it on CD, 2 copies of it on vinyl, and no doubt if I ever see that in tape, I'm going to buy it too. But like, that's because that's one of my favourite albums ever. Do you know what I mean? So if I had the money and someone came up to me and they offered me the first Battery album, black mark print and everything, first press and yellow goat, and they were like, right, you can have that for €1,500. If I had the money, I'd buy it, and I wouldn't sell it. It'd be framed and it'd be kept. That's because I love the band that much, right? So that's really the only, that now, and if it's an investment, are the only times I could really justify buying a first press. Because, like, man, look at the price of some first pressings, right? Some are ridiculous amount of money, right? You put this into context. When an album comes out, an album on vinyl, for the most part, brand new, is between maybe 20 and 35 euro, right? 40 if it's a double LP, okay? So if it's that much when it comes out, right, justify spending 2 grand on one. Do you know what I mean? If unless, like I said, it's an investment or you really really like the band. Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't mind spending €1,500 if you're really like, if you, first of all, if you have it. If you don't have it, don't obviously go into debt to buy a fucking record. But you know what I mean? If you have it, just spend it, and you'll cherish the shit out of it. You won't let anyone touch it. Or if you, what I mean actually by investment, which I must clarify too, is like if you're one of those people that buys and sell records. I did that for a while when I was a little bit younger. I had particularly like when I had a gap year from school and I was doing online quite a bit. I wasn't buying records as much, but I was swapping records online with people, and I had great crack doing that for a while. I don't do it anymore because it's kind of demanding doing that, because you know yourselves, if you buy vinyl and stuff like that, you have to post vinyl a particular way or else it's going to get damaged. Like I mentioned, issues of creasing and stuff. The same way poorly storing a vinyl, it can happen when you poorly post one too. 2 seconds, I'm taking a sip of this old thingy-majig. 2 seconds now. Oh, lovely and non-alcoholic beer. But yeah, what's the thing with first pressings? First pressings, it's just kind of like, I'm ranting a small bit about this. Like I said, it's an investment or it's a novelty. That's it. Okay. Don't be buying first pressings to be that person who's like, I have a first pressing this, a first pressing that, first pressing this. If you land on a great deal, if you get it for less than like less than €50, fine. There you go. You can do that. Do you know what I mean? But I know so many people that spend so much money on records doing that, and I don't see why. You can make the argument of a mix. I really don't see any justifying that. You might be quick to say, well, Emmett, you just mentioned the battery thing. Yeah, but you know, I had to buy bootlegs to try and find that mix, like, do you know what I mean? And there is a notable difference, and I could do a whole podcast on that in its own. But yeah, I see so many, particularly young people, man, and I was so guilty of this when I was younger too. I really wanted to get first pressings and stuff because I think I was trying my best when I was 17, 18 years of age to try and be wiser beyond my years, if that made any sense. I was really, really fucking trying as hard as I could to be the lad who had like loads of first pressings and had kind of like your man Infidel Amsterdam, where I wanted to be the lad standing in front of a wall of CDs and records and stuff like that. And as I've gotten older and stuff like that, I'm not as much like that anymore. I buy music religiously. I do buy albums every week and everything like that. It's just a force of habit now more than anything. But I don't really care. My main concern when I buy an album is I want it to sound good. That's all I care about. If it's a new release, I don't have to worry about that. If it's an older release, I don't really have to worry about that as much. I know people that will get nitpicky about it. It's weird that I mentioned Infidel Amsterdam now, because I'm going to mention other metal YouTubers. Your man Killbot and Gorgor Attack mentioned in a video, very interesting video I've watched a few times, about the issues with record collecting and stuff like that, about particular mixes and stuff. And very, very minor differences in the mix, man, can really be the dictating factor of whether people like start shopping for a particular record or not. Like compare the US version of Screaming for Vengeance with the UK version, right? There's very, very minimal differences in the mix. Like really, really minimal differences. Like the low end in one is boosted and the other isn't. Do you know what I mean? It's not really noticeable unless you're listening on a super hi-fi system, like, do you know what I mean? So I'd never worry too much about that. And look, if you want to do that, if you want to go and you want to be nitpicky like that, and you know, for some people that's the fun of it, and I get that. I've done that in the past. You want specific versions of specific records, and half the fun of being a record collector is seeking those out and finding them, and I get that. But when it comes to first pressings and stuff like that, don't bother your whole, like, do you know what I mean? Again, unless you really, really love the band, or if it's an investment you're planning on reselling it again, because it's just throwing money in a hole, like, do you know what I mean? People complain about with rent all the time. Like, people complain about people who rent because it's kind of like, well, you're never going to own that property, so why would you throw money at it? But it's the same as spending exorbitant amounts of money on a record, like, do you know what I mean? Unless you're going to resell it or you really, really want it, you can't justify it. I've probably said that about 10 times already, and I'm sorry. It's just, I really feel strongly about that there's really no justifying that, unless, again, for the 18th time, unless you really love the band or it's an investment. I need to move away from that subject, or I'm going to say it for a 12th to 13th time. But yeah, I want to just touch on a thing with storage and records as well. Like I said, you can buy a cheap case for 50 quid on Amazon. You could buy two of them, I'd say, for 50 quid on Amazon. One of those ones where it just kind of, there's like a flap thing on it. You just unbuckle it, it comes over, you can hold 50 records inside in it, and it just locks in the front. some of those shelving units you can buy in IKEA for 50 quid too, and they're brilliant. They really look nice and stuff like that too. I know plenty of people that have them, and they really, really do look nice, and they do the job, and they keep your records safe. Another thing I really need to recommend and shout out, and I don't know why nobody told me, why nobody mentioned this, I should say, when I started collecting records. When you buy records, when you buy vinyls, right, loads of labels, or particularly metal labels, are really sound, and they'll give you a protective sleeve for the case, right? They'll give you a protective sleeve for the sleeve itself to maintain and protect the artwork and help keep it in as mint condition as possible, right? Iron Bonehead do that. I bought the last time I bought vinyl, which would have been around October or so, I think. I bought most of Possession's discography on vinyl from Iron Bonehead, and every single one of them, without fail, came with a protective sleeve. And it probably costs the label a little bit extra to do it, but it is, like, I know for myself, after that happening, when I go back to collecting vinyl in not too distant future, when I have more storage space and I myself invest in those cases and stuff like that, I will definitely be doing a random shopping spree on Iron Bonehead as a result of that. I can't recommend that to every one of you listening enough. Go and buy protective sleeves for your vinyls, right? I have a really stupid story as to why I'm recommending this, but I can give 110 more examples too. Over the summer, I had a friend over. This was during the level 3 lockdowns when you could visit people and stuff like that. I had a friend over. We were having some beers and we were listening to some records in my room. I was absolutely lalad, and I fucking tripped over my foot, man. And if I did, I'm looking at it right now. My record player and my CD player are right under a Velux window, right? And to the left of that is the two crates that hold the majority of my vinyl, man. Well, if I fucking did, I tripped, and half the fucking beer I had went over one of the crates. Now, I was incredibly lucky. Incredibly lucky. Only 6 of them got damaged out of about 30, 40 inside in that crate. One single, the sleeve of it got destroyed. 6 records, very minor damage to the bottom of them, but enough damage that I would nearly consider going out and replacing all of them. I'm not even messing. I'll throw up some photos of these on the Instagram story around the time that I put this episode out for some context and stuff like that. But basically what it did was, when I fell and the beer fell over it, the glass shattered and everything like that, and weirdly enough didn't cause any damage. And I was fine as well, actually. I should mention that. Stupid drunken stumble. And it went over a few of the records, and what it did was it caused the bottom of them to stick. And I was just thought, fuck no. And I tried getting something thin to go between them and just slice in between to try and to get them to stop sticking together, basically. And what ended up happening was, as I did that, and I still went to pull them apart, they peeled. So on some of them, the back of the sleeve is fucked. On some of them, it's the front, and it's so annoying. One in particular that breaks my heart even saying is, I had, and this is going to be irony of the first degree now, because I just gave out about people buying first presses. I was given a first press of Defenders of the Faith by a neighbour of ours a few years ago, because he was just clearing out his records. He didn't want them anymore, and he didn't want to go to the bother of sending them off. I offered him money. He didn't want any money. He had everything he wanted on CD again anyway, but he just gave that to me for free. And the cover is fucking destroyed. Like, the bottom half of the cover is fucking destroyed from that. So what was the lesson there? Well, first of all, don't go near your records when you're fucking drunk if you're a retard like me. But more importantly, buy protective sleeves for your records. You can buy them online, you can buy them on Amazon, you can buy them at Thomann. Actually, the great way for me to plug an Irish thing here too. Sentinel Records up in Dublin, man. They are selling those sleeves. They're selling them for singles too. So if you got 12-inch singles, you got EPs that you need to protect, man, hop on over to Sentinel Records and you can buy them for next to nothing, man. I was looking at them there only a week or two ago, and now I didn't waste money, but I spent quite a bit of money buying storage units for my CDs over the last week or so. But that is definitely going to be my next investment. It's going to be buying some sleeves over in Sentinel Records. And genuinely, guys, that you see through things. You know what? The majority of you know what they are. You go right over your vinyls and they keep them safe. Had I had my records covered with one of those, I would not have to be telling you about the time that I had to fucking destroy my records, or the sleeve, or the covers of one or two of them, trying to pull them apart. Honestly, like, and yeah, you may be thinking, oh well, that doesn't. Why would I go spend my money doing that? I'm not an idiot. Like, just think of it this way, right? If your roof strikes a leak in the morning, and the roof falls through, right? Now, granted, as long as something heavy doesn't fall on your records, right? If something falls on your records and breaks them, that's different. But if it's just water falls on top of them, if you have all your records covered with record sleeves, it will keep every single one of them safe. They won't be, the actual records themselves will still play, but the cover art for most of them, unless they get submerged in water, will be fine. And honestly, don't put yourself in the position where I'm in now, where I have 6 records. The bones of €100 worth of records there that I'm genuinely considering buying different copies of because of that. Because of one stupid mistake one time. Well, 2 stupid mistakes. One, I didn't have cover sleeves from, and 2, I fucking lost my foot when I was drunk. Don't be that guy. And just take care of your records, like, do you know what I mean? What's another thing I would say to myself, or I would say to 18, 17-year-old me? One thing which I should have mentioned when I was giving out a little bit about first pressings and stuff like that. If you are going to buy first pressings, lads, genuinely look into every detail about the specific pressing you're looking for. Like I mentioned, Discogs is an invaluable resource when it comes to this. If you go onto Discogs, if you're looking for specific releases, right? I mentioned the Soundhouse tapes by Maiden a few minutes ago. I bought a bootleg copy of that off of Discogs over the summer. I got it for next to nothing. But what's brilliant about Discogs is in the case of rare releases like that, there'll be like a header on the top of the page, and it will go through the specific things that will identify a first press and an original copy of that release compared to a fake. And it's there for most sought after releases. It's there for. And Discogs is sound enough. If something is bootlegged ridiculously, like if people are trying to mess people money all the time with specific pressings, they will just take something off the market. I was putting together a Thin Lizzy documentary about a year ago now. I stopped doing it. I put a pause to it anyway, I should say, because of just college and work and everything. I just don't have the time between the podcast, the radio show, college, work, and I have a life too. I just didn't have the time to invest in it now, and I'll come back to it. I have loads of recordings for it done, but I'll come back to it in time. I wanted to get a copy of the first Thin Lizzy single, The Farmer, and I went on to Discogs. I was going to see if I could get into a little bit of a bidding war for it, because it was something I'd like to have anyway. And they had it pulled from the market over several cases of people being fleeced for money over fake prints and fake presses and bootlegs and all that type of crack. So in some cases, when you're buying records and stuff like that, another thing that you can do is you can go and you can actually see if people have appraised specific records. Specific bands that I would recommend doing that for are Black Sabbath, Thin Lizzy, Judas Priest, and there's probably loads of noise coming from below me now inside in the kitchen, man. Honestly, anytime I try and fucking record this podcast, everyone just tries to make a symphony with plates. But yeah, any bands like Lizzy, Scorpions is another one, early Scorpions especially, man. Some of those records can go for, and Sabbath is of course the main one. Sabbath and Zeppelin are actually the most important too, I should mention with this, because people get fooled for this all the time. There are specific appraisals online for first pressings of those albums. Some of those Vertigo pressings of Sabbath stuff, man, can go for thousands, genuinely, like. So be sure to go and see online if the record you're looking for has been appraised, and find out those details. And if someone is offering you a record for X amount of money, double check everything, because you have no buyer's insurance and you buy records online. So if you get fleeced for €1,500, that money is down the drain, and you have something that might be worth 20. So be very, very careful with that type of crack. And there's sites as well that you can get records appraised on too. I can't remember any offhand. I just got an urge to do this episode of the podcast, so I didn't take any notes. And if I think of them during the week, I'll drop them on next week's podcast. But yeah, it's so important. Get your records appraised, man, honestly. And if you're going selling your records, man, get your records fucking appraised. Get your records priced right, and get what you're owed from. And when I mean appraised too, I don't just mean that this is the right press and stuff like that. Obviously go and get that checked right too, but the condition of your record is very important too. Spin your record, make sure your record isn't skipping at any point. Make sure you still have all the inserts if you want to sell it for full whack. Any leaflets and everything like that come with your records, lads, if they come inside the record, keep them, because they're always worth money to collectors down the line. Same with posters. Don't stick your posters on the wall with blue tack if you want to resell them. Same with sticky tape. Any damage, so many creases, you're not going to get money from, unless it's a rare thing like the Masters of Reality by Sabbath with the poster. If you have the poster for that, man, you're looking at $5,000. But yeah, get what you're owed for your records. do it properly, do it right. When you want to sell off records, make sure you have all your shit together, and especially if you're doing it on Discogs, don't act the girl. I would recommend, look, if you're under the age of 21, don't be selling records on Discogs, right? I don't speak for everyone, I can only speak for myself. I was a bit of a dipshit when I was 18 years of age, and I definitely wouldn't have known what I was doing. And what ends up happening on Discogs is if you have any bit of an awkward interaction with someone, they can leave you a bad review, and you don't want that, because it can be the thing that stops you from being able to buy that specific pressing of an album that you've been looking for ages. Is there anything else? I don't think there's anything else I can really say about this that's coming to mind anyway so far. The most important takeaways from this, very simple, lads. Look after your records. Buy record sleeves. Buy see-through record sleeves for your records. If you're living in Ireland, you can buy them on Central Records based up in Dublin. They have an online site too. You can buy X amount of them in a pack for next to nothing. You can get them 12-inch ones too, which is brilliant, really really handy stuff, and an easy way for me to plug an Irish outlet too. That's not an advertisement, by the way. I wasn't asked to do that. I was just on the site a week or so ago and noticed that, and I just said I'd give it a mention when I'm talking about this type of stuff. Don't get fleeced with first pressings. Don't go out of your way to buy first pressings all the time. Just buy first pressings for the albums you really, really like. And if you're a standard going like, oh, well, I really want to buy them for 20 of the album, just don't be wasting money. For every €70 you spend on a unique pressing like that, you could have 5 great albums. Do you know what I mean? So, do you know what I mean? Like, it's worth it. And as well as that, you might be like, oh, well, quality versus quantity. I would always argue it's worth taking risks and stuff like that. I would rather spend €70 on 5 records I know nothing about, than buy a needless first person one, unless I really 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 like the album or it's an investment. Jesus, that's the quote of the show this week. Outside of that, yeah, just invest in storage space. If I could say anything to 18-year-old me that was starting to buy records, man, invest in storage space. Storage boxes, shelving units, they cost next to nothing online. And look, you might be weighing it up being like, oh, I could get 2 records or I could get this. Or you will be thankful when his records or her records are safe and they're sound and they still play great, you know what I mean? And yeah, don't be a drunken dipshit near your records like I was. I didn't intentionally fall, of course, but you know, shit happens. And again, I'm looking at 6 records and everything. I'll probably give them away. If I replace them, that'll be a competition at some point on From the Depths. I'll be giving away some records for free with minor damages on them. But you can cover the post. Yeah, so that's pretty much it, lads. That's me giving my little 2 cents about record collecting and stuff like that. There's probably some stuff I'm forgetting. Again, this would be a great one to touch on with the panel, and I really can't wait for those panel episodes to kick off. I'm going to, do you know something? I am recording the first panel episode this week. I am going to put this out as the next episode of the show. You're probably listening to this now being like, well, we know you're going to put that out as the next episode of the show because we're listening to it right now. And what I'll probably do is I'm not going to go near my microphone after this until we're recording a panel episode of the show or an interview. I'm not doing any more hot takey podcasts for a while because I've loads of interviews and stuff like that lined up, and as well as that, I'd say it's been 3 weeks now of me talking alone into this microphone, and as much as it's been good crack, I'd say you want the guests and stuff to start rolling again, and I promise you they are coming hot and heavy. We have some absolutely fucking fantastic guests lined up for the next few weeks over on From the Depths. Will I spoil one or two of them? I won't, and I'm really bad at doing that. As soon as I get any news to do with an interview, I have something shared online, and I've told myself now after the last one, I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to say on the air who the last one was. That one I announced on Facebook is confirmed, but I'm not going to say anything yet. And as well as that, there's no really point in saying it because you might have an interview confirmed, but the interview mightn't happen for 6 months. Do you know what I mean? You could be slotted in, but the tour or promo cycle mightn't be happening until the autumn. So there's no point saying it 6 months in advance, do you know what I mean? Which I have done. There is one that won't be happening until like August. And I know for a fact over the summer when stuff reopens again and I'm drinking with mates, they're going to be like, when is this one happening? And I'm going to be like, it's going to be another few months. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of this episode of the podcast. Like I said, next week's one will be the panel one. It should have been this one, but I just got a burst of creativity and just decided to get a little bit ranty. Again, I recorded this episode the day after releasing the one about separating the art from the artist. And that episode and this one will undoubtedly be revisited in panel episodes of the show in the future too. And I'm really, really looking forward to finally getting those panel episodes together and introducing you guys to the panels that we're going to have together for some of them. We have some really interesting topics to cover on the panels too. I'll tell you a few of those because they're going to be happening. They're happening now. They are happening as of this week and stuff like that. So I can tell you one of them, which should be the first one, I'll have a group of mates and we're going to be talking about some of our favourite debut albums in the history of metal, so our favourite first releases from particular artists. Another one, I'm having a few of my mates on to talk about. I'm naming the episode Sexism and Metal, but it's not really going to be about sexism and metal per se. We're going to be talking about more kind of discussing or throwing hot takes around the question of whether or not there's a gender divide in metal. That's the question at large. And the reason that I'm putting that episode together was Sam Dunn and Co. over at Banger Films did an episode of their show Lock Horns about that, and I thought it was disgraceful. I didn't think it represented not the metal community I'm a part of anyway. I'm not a woman, so I can't say anything like that. But I know for my mates that are women that are into metal, I don't think they ever walk into a gig and really feel ostracized. But when I think that, I do have to remember I'm not a girl, so I don't know what that's like. So I thought that'd be an interesting one to have some mates on and talk about that too. Other ones, I'm going to be having a specific. I jokingly named this to Dave that was on episode 2. I always wanted to have older lads from the Irish scene that have been going to gigs for years on just for a chat about older gigs and stuff over a beer. And those are going to be happening too. This is like the blessing of lockdown, is everyone is free, so we can do all these episodes now. But I have entitled that little mini series within the podcast Boomer Brigade. So if you see an episode of the show entitled Boomer Brigade, basically what it's going to be is me chatting away to an older member of the Irish metal community, and we are going to be talking about old gigs and stories from the past and all that type of crack. And I'm really, really looking forward to getting those together. You're not going to know anyone that's going to be on those, and I think that's the beauty of it, because they're going to have 101 stories and stuff like that. And I think it'll be great crack, and I'm very much looking forward to doing all that stuff and getting all that crack underway with the podcast. So interviews, panels, Boomer Brigade, all to come over the next month or so here on the From the Depths podcast. So lads, as always, thank you very, very much for checking out another episode of the From the Depths podcast. My name, as always, has been Emmett, and yeah, I will see you next week. And as well as that, I'll see you Wednesday at 8 p.m. on Wire 99.9 FM too. So if you want your little bit of midweek